Secretary Manalo, among his first meetings was with our office, and so moving forward, we believe that it is the proper setting for the DFA Press Corps to interact with the officials of the Department of Foreign Affairs. So this morning, many of the queries that we received from the media were about the ASEAN ministerial meeting, which is coming up in a few days. So for the first part of this session, we have with us the Assistant Secretary of the ASEAN Affairs Office in the Department of Foreign Affairs, Assistant Secretary Daniel Espiritu, who is an experienced career diplomat, and he also recently assumed for about how long? As ASEAN ASEC?
9 months.
Oh, 9 months.
Yeah.
Okay, so he knows the work, and he will be speaking to you about the ASEAN ministerial meetings coming up. And immediately after that, all questions regarding ASEAN may be directed to him, after which he will then, move on to back to work, and then we will continue with the press briefing with our new spokesperson, Ambassador Tess Daza, responding to some other questions which were submitted prior to the briefing, and if there's time for other questions after that, we will try to accommodate that. So without further delay, ASEC Espiritu, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, ASEC Menez. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming over and giving us this opportunity to brief you on the coming ASEAN ministerial meeting and the Philippine participation in it. Okay, let me begin. I'm sorry, I'll have to keep my mask on because just over the weekend, 3 of our personnel at the office tested positive for COVID. But don't worry, I tested negative. So.
and you don't want to travel. You want to safeguard your travel.
I don't want to jeopardize my travel. Okay, thank you so much. Let me begin. So our new Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Enrique Manalo, will be leading the Philippine delegation to the 55th ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting and related meetings, which will be held in Phnom Penh, Cambodia on 2 to 6 August 2022. So 5 days actually, 5 days of meeting. It is at the invitation of Cambodia's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Prak Sokhonn, this year's AMM chair. An ASEAN senior officials meeting will be held prior to the 55th ASEAN ministerial meeting. The ministerial meeting proper will only be on August 3. However, there will be, as we said, related meetings. So many other meetings preceding and succeeding it. So let me enumerate the number of meetings so that you can have a grasp of the enormity of this occasion. Aside from the senior officials meeting, which will precede the foreign ministers meeting, the foreign ministers will also meet at the SHANFEZ, or Southeast Asia Nuclear Weapons Free Zone Commission. It is at the level of foreign ministers. Now, this discusses the progress in making Southeast Asia always free of nuclear weapons. And so far, we are of the position that it's still free of nuclear weapons. Then it will be followed by a meeting of the foreign ministers with the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. The ICHAR is made up of representatives from all the 10 ASEAN member countries promoting human rights in the region. They will be reporting on the progress of their work throughout the year. Then on the night of August 2, His Excellency Prak Sokhonn, the Foreign Minister of Cambodia, will be hosting the foreign ministers to a welcome dinner. This is just for the 10 foreign ministers of ASEAN. or at least their representatives. The opening ceremony of the 55th AMM and related meetings will be held in the morning of August 3. The opening ceremony will be open to the public and to the press. Some of you will be there. And this will also be accompanied by the awarding of the ASEAN Prize for 2021, in which Brunei, a Bruneian, will be given the prize. This is the head of the Hand for Hand, the international NGO catering to vulnerable populations. Now, after that, the plenary session will begin, and this will be, of course, closed to the public, and it will be followed in the afternoon by a retreat session of the foreign ministers, during which they will be discussing more sensitive issues on international developments. Then it will be followed by, on August 4, by what we call the post-ministerial conferences. And what is this post-ministerial conferences? This is actually the bulk of the ministerial meetings during this group of meetings, because this will be the portion where the ASEAN foreign ministers will be meeting with the external partners, with the foreign ministers of the external partners. And there are a lot of them. And let me enumerate the countries whose foreign ministers will be going and meeting with our foreign ministers. China, Republic of Korea, Japan, United Kingdom, India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the European Union, the United States, and Russia. So each and every country will be given an individual and separate meeting with the foreign ministers. But of course, because there are so many, and it will drag on to the end of the day, each one will be given a time slot of only around 1 hour. There will even be sessions where two ministerial meetings will be held at the same time. And so the foreign ministers will have to shuttle from one meeting to another to deliver their interventions. Now, the most important ministerial meeting for the Philippines is the ASEAN-EU Post-Ministerial Conference, because that will be the one that will be co-chaired by the Philippines as the country coordinator. We are this year and next year the country coordinator of ASEAN-EU relations. Now, Secretary Manalo will co-chair it with Joseph Borrell, the High Representative of EU on Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. That is their counterpart of a foreign minister. So this will be the first time that the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting will be held in person after 2 years of holding these meetings virtually in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic and travel restrictions. So this is really significant in this vein. Virtual meetings are nice, but you know, it's a very limited kind of meeting. It's not that candid. You don't see the body language of your counterparts, and it's difficult to consult on the side to resolve issues. So the Secretary is looking forward to meeting face-to-face with his counterparts to advance Philippine priorities in ASEAN, especially under the administration of our newly elected President, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., as well as contribute to ASEAN's collective priorities. This will be Secretary Manalo's first ASEAN meeting in his capacity as Philippine Secretary of Foreign Affairs. However, let me stress that Secretary Manalo is no stranger to ASEAN. In fact, we believe that he has already almost probably more than 30 years of experience in ASEAN, ever since the time that he was a young diplomat in the Department of Foreign Affairs. He was also previously the Philippine leader to the ASEAN Senior Officials Meeting when he was Undersecretary of Foreign Affairs. The ASEAN foreign ministers are expected to discuss ASEAN's community building efforts, including Cambodia's priorities as ASEAN chair for 2022, as well as ASEAN's external relations. The foreign ministers are also expected to exchange views on regional and international issues. Secretary Manalo is expected to assert the 1982 UNCLOS and the Arbitral Award as the twin anchors of our actions and policies on the South China Sea. He will also raise Philippine priorities for the post-pandemic recovery and the importance of maintaining ASEAN centrality amid geopolitical rivalries. Among other relevant issues, of course. The Secretary will also have the chance to hold bilateral talks with his ASEAN counterparts and the foreign ministers of dialogue partners at the sidelines of the various meetings. Now, these are now being arranged. Around 30 outcome documents are being targeted to be adopted or noted during the meetings, including the joint communique of the 55th ASEAN ministerial meeting. I guess that ends my briefing for you. I'm now open to possible questions.
Thank you, ASEC Espiritu. As mentioned, we will now entertain questions regarding the ASEAN ministerial meeting, and also mentioned earlier was the fact that many of the questions were submitted prior to this session, and I see that primarily these were questions from Jonah and from Malu. During the presentation, I think some of the points of your questions were touched upon, but if you would like to ask the questions again or clarify some points, we do have the microphones on the side. So please, you can verbally express the questions that you submitted prior. Yes, the microphone is just behind you.
Hello, good morning. I'm Jonah from Asahi Shimbun. We are interested to know if the Russian foreign minister is attending the ASEAN meetings in person, and the Chinese one too, Chinese foreign minister. Also, what countries is the Philippines having bilaterals with? No, which ones have confirmed? Which ones have are still in the works? And what is the Philippines' position with regards to the recent developments in Myanmar?
Okay.
Thank you.
As for the bilaterals, I cannot divulge it yet. They're still being prepared. They're still being arranged. So please give us some time for that one. But as for the Philippine position in Myanmar, I think it's already clear. The ASEAN has already released a statement on this, and the Philippine position is very much the same as that of ASEAN. But probably just to add more stress to it, let me tell you that aside from the position of ASEAN of expressing being extremely troubled and saddened by the execution of the 4 activists in Myanmar, the Philippines denounces that execution. We also find it reprehensible, and we think that it was done in an inopportune moment, especially because we are just days away from the AMM. ASEAN itself believes that this shows some kind of lack of will, political will, to really carry out the 5-point consensus. And so we are even more strongly pushing for the swifter and complete implementation of the 5-point consensus, especially considering that there has not been much progress on the 5-point consensus beyond the designation of special envoy for the ASEAN chair and the meetings in Myanmar. But even the meetings in Myanmar of the special envoy has not yet succeeded in bringing together the special envoy and some of the more significant leaders of the parties involved politically in that country. Yeah, thank you. Is that okay, Johanna?
Russian foreign minister.
Well, the Russian foreign minister, of course, we have a post-ministerial conference with the Russian foreign minister. There are a lot of issues. Russia has been a partner for a long time of ASEAN, and so we have a lot of common cooperation between us. In fact, 2022 is the year of scientific and technical cooperation between ASEAN and Russia. The relations between ASEAN and Russia transcends politics and includes all of these economic and socio-cultural cooperation activities, and that's one of them. And then we are also working on the work program, the next work program of trade and investment between ASEAN and Russia. And, well, that would still go towards helping us in this economic recovery in the wake of the pandemic and, of course, the crisis in Ukraine. So those will be the topics. But I know that you're also raring to know the ASEAN position concerning the crisis in Ukraine. Well, as you are well aware, we have already in ASEAN released 3 statements on Ukraine. But the common thread remains the same. We remain consistent and clear on our position. First of all, we are calling for the cessation of hostilities in Ukraine. We express great concern over the humanitarian crisis, especially in terms of the civilian casualties and the targeting of civilian infrastructures. We are calling for a more effective and safe distribution of humanitarian and relief materials. But more than that, we're also calling for an investigation into the alleged atrocities in the conflict. So that's both the Philippine position and the ASEAN position on Ukraine with regards to Russia. And Russia knows this. We have intimated this to them again and again in the various meetings that we had with Russia ever since the military action that they had in Ukraine.
Jonah, yes. One follow-up question?
Just about North Korea. Will North Korea be participating in the ARF? And at what level?
Well, so far the indication is that they will be attending at the foreign ministers level also. And again, the Philippine and ASEAN position on North Korea is clear. For the Philippines especially, we condemned the firing of missiles of North Korea. Again, we are calling for them to engage in peaceful dialogue and settlement of their dispute through the various fora in the international arena, especially in ASEAN, which also offers good office for the management of their disputes. But more importantly, we're calling upon North Korea to the UN resolutions already in existence concerning the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Thank you. Malu also submitted some questions that I think were partially addressed, but please, if you have, could you use the microphone, please?
Okay, just to follow up on Myanmar, sir. Lately, I'm not sure if it's going to be you or ASEC, DAZA. Lately, we have not sent any ambassador to Myanmar. Have we downgraded our relations with Myanmar?
You are.
There are a number of polls that do not have ambassadors yet. We are in a period of transition, coming to a new government. So it's not as if it's a downgrading. I know there will be a number of appointments. It has started. A number of appointments have actually been submitted to the Commission on Appointments, as well as for the other posts that have no head of post.
Okay, so we are not downgrading our relations with Myanmar. But apparently, Myanmar is not listening to us or to the ASEAN. And there's utter disregard at every step of effort by the ASEAN and the Philippine government to at least reach out to the pro-democracy forces there and to at least lessen the tension there. What are we supposed, what are we going to do, sir, in ASEAN and
Okay.
Philippines?
Everything that you said was actually were actually reflected in the statement of ASEAN on the recent killings in Myanmar. Now, the thing about it is that they would like to participate at the official level, but the Philippines and ASEAN have stood packed on our position that as long as there's no progress in the 5-point consensus, then we'll only settle for a non-political representation in these meetings of Myanmar. So that means no foreign minister. The senior officials are the career diplomats of Myanmar, who hold the position of the senior officials in ASEAN meeting are welcome, but political appointees of the administration, especially of the military administration, are not welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask the two questions that I emailed earlier. Number one is on ASEAN. ASEAN is meeting, the ASEAN foreign ministers are meeting at the backdrop of the Ukraine crisis, and still there's pandemic, right? So is there anything that the ASEAN is going to do as a regional bloc to help ease the global economic crisis, at least in the region or in the world? Like, are we going to have a vaccine development or easing of tariffs? Or I know we already have AFTA, but will there be any more concrete actions to help mitigate the impact of the financial crisis?
Yeah.
And the second question, sir, para isa na lang, para makaupo na ako.
Baka makalimutan ko eh.
Baka makalimutan mo.
Okay, go ahead.
Last na lang. ASEAN is insisting, Philippines is insisting is that ASEAN has the centrality in almost all of the multilaterals, like AUKUS or IPEF, Quad, and then RCEP. So how are we going to deal with this? Of course, there's this duality of U.S. and China, taking positions in different spheres. No? So how is ASEAN? How are we going to do it? I mean, putting ASEAN in the center of all these, things. Thank you.
Okay. Let me start with the. You're asking about post-pandemic and economic recovery, and also the measures being done by ASEAN in the wake of the Ukrainian crisis, right? Yeah, especially in the wake of the food shortages, the fuel shortages, the disruption of the supply lines, and even this looming stagflation that they're talking about. Okay, the point is that ASEAN has done a lot. Well, we cannot separate this from the pandemic because the crisis actually started with the pandemic and was simply complicated, of course, massively by the Ukrainian crisis. But let me just say that the same measures that ASEAN has been implementing during the pandemic is still in place and still being, there's still a lot of progress in it. So let me say that the response of ASEAN is huge. To give a strategic picture, it's all situated in the comprehensive ASEAN recovery framework. And under that, there are a lot of major measures that are also being implemented, including the, well, most of you know this already because this has been going for almost a year now, the COVID-19 ASEAN Recovery Fund, which is, of course, being disbursed already in ASEAN for almost a year now to cover the purchase and distribution of vaccines, treatment, and medical supply for ASEAN. And in fact, also allied to this, or corollary to this, there's also this program on the ASEAN Reserve on Regional Medical Supplies. These are prepositioned relief medicines and vaccines for the COVID pandemic that are placed in individual ASEAN countries. In fact, our share is in Camp Aguinaldo. We call it the DELSA in Camp Aguinaldo, the Disaster Emergency Logistics System for ASEAN in Camp Aguinaldo. So those are among the measures that continue to be implemented. And then lately, we have heard also of ACPID, the ASEAN Center for Public Health Emergencies and Emerging Diseases. Finally, the row on this, on where to place the center, has been settled in ASEAN. So in a sort of a Solomonic decision, they decided to place it in all of the three contending countries, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia, right? Indonesia. Okay, but the secretariat will be in Thailand. So there are others, especially in terms of economic recovery. We very well know that in 2021, we're also able to come up with an agreement on the travel arrangements in ASEAN, so as to relax now the movement of people in ASEAN without, of course, sacrificing the health safeguards of our people and our borders. Now, also under ASEAN EU arrangements, we have the CATA, the Comprehensive Air Travel Agreement. It has already been signed. It's being legally brushed, and we expect to have that implemented soon. So, livelihood, economic activities will not be paralyzed in ASEAN simply because we have this current crisis. Now, that's only as far as the pandemic is concerned. Although, of course, all of this also helped in the wake of the Ukrainian crisis. In the wake of the Ukrainian crisis, energy security and food security are constantly also being discussed in ASEAN, in the political pillars, the political bodies of ASEAN, but more so in the under the economic pillar. And so, in fact, they have already there are many of them. I don't think I have the time to enumerate all of them, but workshop, fora, conferences are being done under the economic pillar to address these things, and harmonization of policy measures and activities to further economic activities and relax our food security issues, especially in the face of food shortages because of the shortage of supply from that area, from the European area. Is it okay? And actually also, there's still some unconcluded proposals in ASEAN which will be further discussed and addressed in this current ministerial meeting. China is proposing statement on energy security and also a separate statement on food security. And the other external partners are proposing the same measures. So I think that pretty much covers our issues on food, fuel security, as well as the supply chain disruption. Of course, the implementation of the RCEP will be a big help towards this leeway for economic recovery. Yeah, thank you. Oh, the next question, centrality. Okay. Let's start with RCEP. RCEP was, of course, formulated with ASEAN as the center from the very start. So that's already enough testament to ASEAN centrality. We now only have to look at how it will be implemented among the different countries. It's now up to the countries involved to maximize the benefits they can get from this agreement. And but definitely, because ASEAN is at the center, and actually, if you look at it, the external partners are only auxiliaries to ASEAN in this arrangement. ASEAN's benefit and interest will be guaranteed in this process. Now, with regards to the IPAF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework of the United States, okay, let me first clarify that it is not an ASEAN institution. It's an American institution. It's the economic aspect of the Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States. And it was offered not only to Southeast Asian countries, but to almost all of the Asia-Pacific. Now, at this point, what we were offered were simply broad strokes of what this framework would be. There are no specifics yet as far as operationalization is concerned, although we are very aware that it will, of course, tackle trade, investment, quality finance, infrastructure, and even governance issues, anti-corruption, and climate change, and biodiversity, and environmental issues. So it's quite broad. If you look at it, it's some kind of an expanded TPP, and even more, because it also includes quality financing and environment, and as I said, governance. But so far, it's still quite premature to say how it will affect ASEAN. Because in the first place, we are not even sure if all of ASEAN will come on board. Because it was, as I said, not ASEAN specific. It was offered by the United States to the entire region. And we do hope that several ASEAN countries will join the initiative. Because we do see potential benefits for us. But we have to be careful. We have to first see the specifics before we fully commit. Because as we have seen, even in RCEP and in all the previous FTAs that we had, well, due diligence had to be made to make sure that our interests will be paramount. Yeah, thank you. Will it be okay? Yeah, thank you.
I saw Mr. Sasaki. you wanted to raise a question, please proceed to the mic.
Sorry, let me correct on ACFI, the other country was not Malaysia but Thailand. Oh, sorry, Vietnam. Yeah, Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia. The center is in Thailand, the secretariat. Yes.
I'd like to this is Sasaki of Kyodo News, Japanese news agency.
Could you speak closer to the mic, please?
Okay. I'd like to ask further about relations with Russia to Mr. Espiritu once again. In G20 foreign ministers meeting in Bali, there was a division, and some G7 members skipped reception of the ministers, and also no group photo was taken there. But you called Russia as a partner, and you mentioned about the ASEAN-Russia meeting, which is held separately. Is there any countries, including the Philippines, who boycott the separate meeting with Russia?
Okay.
And is Secretary Manalo is positive to be taken group photo with Mr. Lavrov?
Sorry, I did not get much of what you said, but the way I understand it, you're asking about the participation of Russia in the meetings, right?
Yes.
And possible dinners, and the dinners, right?
Yes, and
Possible boycott. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Let me tell you that from the very start, there have been moves among the external partners of ASEAN to exclude Russia from many of the meetings, workshops, and fora of the ASEAN, including the ASEAN Regional Forum. But this is the thing about ASEAN. Probably you can do that in other international bodies whose rules, regulations, and other parameters and terms of reference provide for such exclusion. And so we have seen that done in the Human Rights Council. But ASEAN is unique and distinct in the sense that it provides a forum for preventive diplomacy, for the peaceful management of disputes and tensions, even among conflicting parties, even among warring parties. So you will see that India, Pakistan, North Korea, South Korea. Technically, North Korea and South Korea are still at war. They just had an armistice in 1954. So it's unique in the sense that we provide good office and a platform for discussion, for peaceful settlement of disputes, whatever they may be, as provided for by the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in ASEAN. And so, right after the invasion, there were already moves to exclude Russia. But you know, it was not only other countries who tried to exclude Russia. There were also requests from the other side to exclude other countries who are against Russia. The implication of this on ASEAN could be disastrous. It could disrupt the ASEAN process and ASEAN itself. And so ASEAN had to take a position. We told them the same thing that I said before, that because ASEAN is unique and distinct in the way that it provides a platform for discussion among conflicting parties, we want this distinction to be respected and for ASEAN centrality to be respected. So we said no one will be excluded, no process will be disrupted, everyone is welcome to attend ASEAN meetings. And so far, all the external partners have respected this. There were some modifications in terms of participation, both visual and in terms of actual physical representation, but still they participated. Hopefully this will be maintained. Because in ASEAN, we don't want to escalate tensions. We want to find a way to de-escalate whatever conflict or tensions there are between not only ASEAN countries but external partners. We are all dedicated to peace in the region. I mean, making it more inflammatory will not help things any further. I mean, there are other fora for that, but not ASEAN. Yeah, thank you.
So the Philippines is not excluded to have a bilateral meeting with Lavrov.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michaela, please.
Michaela from GMA News Online.
Thank you.
Can we get an update on the negotiations between ASEAN and China on the Code of Conduct in the South China
Okay,
Sea?
yeah.
And what is the status of the talks and what areas have they covered so far?
Okay. Last year, we were the coordinator of this negotiations for the Code of Conduct. And during our chairmanship, the progress is glacial, but somehow we were able to finish the preamble last year. Now, this year, with the meeting in Siem Reap, and even right now, the negotiations are continuing. We are now on the general provisions. There are already progress on the objectives, and hopefully, in the next few months, we'll be going to the mechanics of the Code of Conduct. But, you know, activities on this have started almost a decade ago already. In fact, the concept came from the DOC since 2002. And so I hope we could understand that seen from this huge backdrop, whatever slow progress we're making right now is already quite a significant progress compared to the last 15 to 18 years. Yeah, thank you. Consensus. Each and every line have to be agreed on by consensus. And China is there. And the ASEAN, all 10 ASEAN countries are there. And you know, we have to be very careful about this because this will be followed in the South China Sea afterwards. There are many interests to consider. Our interest, other countries' interests, and so they would like to make sure that all their interests will be covered once COC is concluded. This will engage later on rules of engagement, which could have impact on sovereign rights and sovereign issues. And so we cannot be doing all of this in haste and regret things afterwards. And I mean, there are 11 countries who are on this, so 11 reservations on each and every line. It has to be done very, very carefully and judiciously. Yeah, thank you.
JP, please.
Hi. This question is addressed to our spokesperson.
Is it ASEAN related?
No, not related to the ASEAN. Not directly.
For the non-ASEAN, we'll come to that.
We'll come to that. Okay.
So, if there are no more questions on ASEAN, yes, please.
Okay. We'll come back to you.
Yeah. Sir, on just a follow-up to your response to Mike, with respect to COC, are there any milestones or breakthroughs that we are expected, that ASEAN is expected, and China are expected to achieve in this meeting, like an agreement or an agreement in principle in relation to the COC, in relation to the crafting of COC during this meeting?
Well, actually, there's already sort of an agreement on that since we agreed on the single, what you call the single draft, negotiating draft. You know? But, you know, we are now tackling the details. And that is what's taking some time because definitely it will be based on UNCLOS, but there are other laws of the sea also that will have to be taken into consideration, like the call reg or the regulations on collisions, SOLAS or safety of life at sea, IMO regulations, and etc.
So based on your assessment, sir, how many more
you cannot
years?
tell.
You cannot tell.
You cannot tell. Imagine, we've been doing this for almost 20 years. And the formal work has been going on for more than 7 years.
And sir, my last question on ASEAN. So there are a lot of issues like Myanmar, Ukraine, South China Sea, and North Korea. And I'm sure ASEAN will multitask. But what will be the most contentious issue, or when it comes to priority, which issue is the probably the most significant?
Well, right now the flavor of the month is Myanmar. Yeah, but Ukraine's still there, and definitely South China Sea will remain at the center of it all. Of course, North Korea every time you have missile firing, so missile launches.
Sir, thank you po.
Yeah, and sorry, about also AUKUS, I forgot about AUKUS. Do we still have time for that? Yeah, for AUKUS and Quad, right? That's your question? Yeah, okay. ASEAN has no institutional connection with AUKUS and Quad. So we're quite clear on that. And never did they also, the participants in those multilateral arrangements also never approach ASEAN on those matters. So I think we have nothing to do with that. Suffice it to say that both the participants of both multilateral arrangements have professed their adherence to ASEAN centrality again and again and again. And that this will not undermine the ASEAN process, and that this will be a force for good in the region. And as the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Secretary of Foreign Affairs has said before, we hope that it will provide equilibrium to the emerging regional security architecture. Yeah, thank you.
Just a reminder, we set 1 hour for the session, and I mean, we can continue with ASEAN, but then that doesn't leave much time for the other questions. So you are free to ask some more questions, but please keep it brief so that we have some time for the other issues. Yes.
Sophia from Rappler po.
Oh, Rappler, Sophia, yes.
Super quick follow-up to Cliff's question on the COC and Mike's question as well. It's still our position that the Hague ruling should be included in the COC. Is it still our position?
Well, nothing's being said yet on that. The important thing is that the Hague ruling is based on UNCLOS, and definitely UNCLOS will be a basis of the COC. Well, it doesn't have to be exactly the Hague ruling. Anyway, the Hague ruling, let me stress this, we are asserting the Hague ruling. But whatever is it that's on the Hague ruling are only reflections of specific provisions in UNCLOS. So whether we invoke the arbitral tribunal award or not, the point is the moment we use UNCLOS in the COC, in the negotiations of the COC, and its resultant mechanisms, I guess that will already be enough. In fact, UNCLOS is bigger than the arbitral award. So we have to be more flexible on that. Not everything, the arbitral award only touched on sovereign rights, on certain features, but COC is more specific. It's more on specific situations that may happen in the South China Sea. Not exactly rights, but let's say unexpected encounters, things like that. What if two naval vessels meet each other? What if a Coast Guard vessel goes near a certain feature or another vessel? Things like this. I mean, these are now microcosmic issues that are no longer covered by, still covered by UNCLOS, but not specifically. So we have to invoke also other laws covering activities in the sea. Of course, all of these are overridingly covered by UNCLOS as the sort of a mother law covering all activities in the sea.
Yeah, just to advise the press corps, there also will be, after the ministerial, a readout session. So perhaps some of the other questions could also happen at that briefing. If there are no other questions on ASEAN?
Yes. Yeah, just a follow up, sir. But is the Philippines still pushing for a legally binding code of conduct?
Well, let's not go to that yet. Definitely, it will be binding, but it has not been decided yet.
Okay.
Because when you say legally, it could be it's a bigger universe than just a code of conduct. There are many possibilities. We cannot say that until the code of conduct has definitely been agreed upon in detail. Because how can we say that we are for legally binding code of conduct if the resultant elements of the code of conduct are not to our interest? You have to look that far. If it's to our interest, of course we will. Mind you, negotiations are still very, very, very fluid. We do not know what the outcome will be. We can only push for legally binding or non-legally binding when we have already seen the final one, and we are sure that it is to our interest under international law.
Sir.
Perhaps let's allow a question from...
Good morning. I'm Celerina Monte from NHK. NHK, sir.
NHK.
Sir, you have mentioned earlier that Secretary Manalo will be insisting on the UNCLOS and arbitral ruling during the upcoming meeting. So I'm wondering if under this new administration, there will be new tack, or what would be the difference the Philippines would going to handle this issue? Will there be any difference from what the previous administration had done?
I think that probably, that question would probably be clearer a little later on as we proceed. These are the first few weeks of the administration, and while the President has given some statements in this regard, the details, of course, are still being worked out during this, I guess, we can still call it a transitory period. Even our Secretary of Foreign Affairs is still, in the process of meeting the President as often as he can. So this may not be a question that the ASEAN ASEC would be able to answer at this point.
So, sir, you're not aware yet if there's any specific guidelines or directives from the President to the FA?
We have the broad outlines as given by the President during the State of the Nation address, but the actual details as we move forward are still, of course, being discussed, because there are also other departments and agencies within government where this particular issue also needs to be consulted, and these interagency mechanisms are also still not fully in place. So please give us some time. It may take, a few months or even up to 6 years to finalize that particular, or the answer to that question. As I mentioned, we only have 11 minutes left for the other issues. So,
should I ask another issue?
Other issues?
Yes.
Last one, another issue. Last
Okay.
one, sir.
So, ASEC Espiritu, thank you
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, guys. Yeah.
And as I mentioned, there is a post-ministerial readout. So, with the remaining minutes, we will now have our spokesperson, Ambassador Tess Daza, a very experienced career diplomat who was ambassador to India and ambassador to Chile, who has just recently assumed this position. Who was it? JP, yes.
Yes, sir. Ma'am, yes, I just have two questions po. Connected pa rin naman po sa mga na-discuss natin in a way, but will the Secretary Manalo recently released a statement asserting the arbitration award as well. Can we say that it is also the position of President Marcos?
During the SONA, the President was very clear that he will not actually, he will be jealous about the territory. Am I clear? Thank you for that question, JP. I take note that, yes, the department has issued a statement during the 6th anniversary of the Arbitral Tribunal Award. And in that statement, we underscored and reiterated that two aspects, the UNCLOS as well as the Arbitral Award, will be the anchor of how we will be dealing with matters relative to the West Philippine Sea. So that's point one. The second is, During the Sonad, the President was also very clear. He actually, at the start of the sections on foreign policy, he actually said, I will not preside over any process that will abandon even 1 square inch of the territory of the Republic of the Philippines. He did not, and this section actually elicited applause and cheers, even a standing ovation if I'm not mistaken. But he actually follows that by saying that he will, let me be clear, we're very jealous of all that is Filipino and that we will not waver. We will stand firm in our independent foreign policy with national interests as our primordial goal. So this is consistent with the Constitution too. So I think that in a way addresses the concern about the arbitral tribunal as well as territorial integrity.
Okay. Ma'am, yes, thank you for that. Will the Philippine government resume discussions on oil and gas exploration with China under President Marcos? The Chinese ambassador yesterday told us that his understanding was the negotiations is not terminated, but will continue with the administration of President Marcos. Thank you.
On the issue of oil and gas, we will defer to the Department of Energy that actually has, it falls under its prerogative, its jurisdiction. So the oil and gas will be under the Department of Energy, and we have no further comment on that yet at this point in time. I have no further comment on that specific issue, yes?
Yes. Please identify yourself, please.
Yes. Hello, my name is Gabo Milde Villegas of Daily Tribune. This is for Ambassador Daza. Beijing has stationed, on the eve of State of the Nation address of President Marcos, Beijing has stationed permanent rescue forces and maritime administrations on its artificial islands in South China Sea, particularly on the Fiery Cross, Subi, and Mischief Reefs. And also, China also performed a very detailed survey on the southwestern portion of the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone before proceeding to the Malaysian waters. May I ask if the Philippines already filed a diplomatic protest against China on this matter, ma'am?
We do not have information about the filing of a protest. At this point in time, we will revert to you on that in another section, yes?
Yeah, just to add, for issues regarding the West Philippine Sea, there is a national task force. And during the previous administration, all issues regarding the West Philippine Sea had to go through the task force. And as I referred to earlier, it is expected that a same interagency mechanism will continue. And in this particular case, that your questions would also need to go through the task force before any decisions are taken or any statements released. So again, the whole of government approach, I think, was one of the priorities of the President. And so we will have to defer to the interagency process at this point.
Okay. Salamat po.
Maybe on the left first, and then if you could step up to the mic so we know who's next in line. Willard?
Hi, good morning. Willard Cheng from ABS-CBN. Just want to ask, what is the next move of the Philippine government on the plan of the ICC prosecutor to resume its investigation on the drug war? And will we allow investigators into the country? And what are the latest instructions, if any, of President Marcos on this matter?
On the ICC question, first I'll reiterate the Philippine position as follows. The Philippine government affirms its commitment to fight impunity for atrocities crimes, notwithstanding the country's withdrawal from the Rome Statute, especially since the Philippines also has a national legislation punishing atrocities. The Philippines underscores that it has the primary jurisdiction to investigate and prosecute a crime against humanity allegedly being committed in the context of an anti-illegal drugs campaign. As the court of last resort, the ICC complements but does not replace national courts. It only operates in cases where national jurisdictions are unable or unwilling to prosecute. The DFA serves as a conduit of information from the ICC from our embassy in The Hague. In view of the government transition, the DFA is in the process of coordinating with lead agencies such as the DOJ and the OSG on this matter.
Sir, sorry, can I just ask
Sophia,
from
yes.
Robert, just a quick follow-up on the ICC. Are there any plans for us to, where do we stand on that, on rejoining? Are there any plans for the Philippines to rejoin the ICC under this new administration?
We actually are no longer a state party to the Rome Statute, and this has been affirmed by the Supreme Court in the case of Pangilinan and Cayetano, effective 17 March 2019. We are aware of the developments relative to the prosecutor of ICC requesting the Philippines to submit its observations. But in terms of that, I think we will have to wait. But as of now, the Philippines actually is no longer party to the Rome Statute.
And no word on plans to join that, if ever? Just clarifying.
At this point in time, and as I said, since we're at a period of transition, we will have to seek guidance. We are not the lead agency in terms of the ICC. It's actually DOJ and OSG. And if you recall, the Solicitor General has actually mentioned that relative to this development and maybe other developments, further consultations will have to be undertaken.
We have 1 minute to 11. Perhaps one more question. Let me just say that the other avenues for questions remain open. So even if we don't tackle all the submitted questions, we will respond to them alternatively. But yes, one more question, Sophia.
Okay, just a quick question. Is there any word on possible first visit of the president? Has he accepted any invitation from any country?
It's a bit early to actually say where he's going to visit. But clearly, he has been invited in different countries for different occasions. This is actually under discussion. I do want to add to what ASEC has mentioned. He mentioned that there will be other fora for us to interact. I mentioned it to a group of you already earlier. I will be part of the DFA Press Corps chat group, so you will know my number, and it will actually be a forum of engagement. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I also want to say, and it has been mentioned by ASEC, I will be working closely with the Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy, and we closely and alongside them. I will be the mouthpiece, but in terms of other aspects, other outputs, OPCD will take the lead. We plan to have a number of activities. It has also been mentioned. We will have, on a more regular basis, consistent with and following protocols, these briefings. We hope to have a follow-up to this where ASEAN will actually give a readout of what has happened during the 55th ASEAN Ministerial Meeting and the Philippine participation there. So that will happen mid-August, after which we also plan to have a meet and greet with the Secretary. It is just something that we will have to address in terms of scheduling, and you will be informed accordingly. We also intend to actually have other briefings on major meetings as well as visits, whether incoming and outgoing, as well as trips. So this is something that we will be doing on a regular basis, and we hope that you will actually be able, from there, you will be able to actually gather the information that you need for your particular work.
So thank you very much, everyone. And
ASEC, could I just also, I apologize. This is my first time to actually, and I'm actually first time to actually meet with you. I do know that there is much responsibility relative to the spokesperson's role, and a lot of challenges ahead. And I also know that I have to leapfrog the learning curve in terms of public diplomacy, but I'm assured by the support extended by ASEC as well as the OPCD team, disabled OPCD team. I do want to actually say that I hope that we will be able to, we are actually exerting all effort to actually be able to facilitate your work by the sharing of accurate and timely information. Having said that, there will be times, however, where we may not be able to answer some of your questions at a given point in time. And this is for various reasons. We may not have the information at hand, or more importantly, we may not have the authority to say and answer accordingly. But we will respect your position to actually solicit as much information at the quickest possible time, and we will do our part to actually also share as much of information. I personally feel you play a very important role, not only in terms of disseminating or sharing the DFA narrative in terms of policy, in terms of its services, in terms of its programs, projects, and activities. But more than that, I think you play a very important role in ensuring that the country becomes a better, a more open, a more inclusive society, a more enlightened society. And if we can in any way help in that process, in your job, we will do our best accordingly. And so having said that, I do want to also nuance my answer. Apologies for the question that you raised earlier, and I think my answer was not very clear. I do want to say the following in terms of the appointment of ambassadors. Malu, the appointment of ambassadors takes into consideration many aspects: political, the status of our relations, and what have you. As of date, there are a number of embassies that do not have ambassadors, largely because many of the ambassadors have either completed their tour of duty, or for other ambassadors who are political and they're coterminous, they have to end their tour in specific countries. So there will be a selection process, and that has actually started, and they will go through the commission on appointments, they will get their agremo, and then they will start serving the country as our representative. In the case of Myanmar, however, it has to be nuanced because of the junta and the actions of the junta. This is actually reflected also in ASEAN because of a non-recognition of the junta. The ASEAN has actually been pushing hard for the compliance in terms of the 5-point consensus. And as explained by ASEC Dan, much still needs to be done. It has been complicated by the execution of four opposition activists, but ASEAN remains hopeful that they will actually be able to comply at the minimum with the 5-point consensus relative to the situation in Myanmar. So I think that will complete. My answer earlier was actually not so much, not nuanced. I think that hopefully that will answer your question. I think, sir, if there are other questions, I know we saw questions about Sabah, and I don't know if you're still interested, but as we have already said, in terms of Sabah, let me get this. And we've actually sent out a WhatsApp response to it in July 14, and stressing that the Philippine government is not party into the litigation and that it cannot comment publicly on this issue. So we do not really have further comments on it at this point in time. Okay, so there were other questions. I don't know if they're still interested to raise it, sir, but it's up to them. So, so we've answered the ICC. We've answered. There was a question relative to the Mr. Batumbakal's report information. I don't know if you will be interested to actually address that. Under which one? Sorry, yeah. While I look at this, yes. Yes.
Ma'am, while you're looking at the other question, can I follow up on the Sabah claim first?
Yes. Yeah, I found it.
Yeah. Well, the Paris arbitration is practically a commercial arbitration,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So it's essentially good that we're not talking about it. But the Malaysian Prime Minister has already said that they're going to do their best to protect the sovereign integrity, the sovereign immunity of Malaysia with respect to that Paris arbitration. So it now borders on the question of whether are we going to do something about it, because we are also claiming Sabah. From the last time I heard it, we're still claiming Sabah, right? As or are we dropping Sabah now? And are we now letting the heirs of Sultanate of Sulu take care of their claims?
Thank you, Malu. But I will reiterate what we mentioned earlier, that we cannot comment on this particular matter. But I also want to add, and as explained by ASEC, it is not just the DFA that deals with the issue of Sabah. There is, in the past, there was a committee, a cluster committee that dealt with security, justice, peace, and they discussed issues that pertain to territorial integrity, security, and alike. That body will still have to be convened, and we will be awaiting guidance on it, from it. The claim actually is separate from this case. It should be seen separately from this case. And as I mentioned earlier, the Philippines was not party to the litigation that was actually initiated by the heirs of the Sultanate of Sulu. So this is where we stand at this point in time. Now I found it, thank you. I saw there was a question about J. Batumbakal drawing attention to a survey. I do want to say this. The incidents like this are also discussed in the National Task Force of West Philippine Sea, which is led by the National Security Advisor, and is using a whole of government approach. Within the NTF, reports like this are verified by our Maritime Law Enforcement Agency. If warranted, the NTF recommends diplomatic action, and the DFA then determines what diplomatic action would be needed on the basis of the facts submitted. On the application of the Marine Scientific Research Permit, the DFA did not receive an application relating this alleged MSR activity.
Okay.
From this, I was saying that we act based on a recommendation by the NTF. At this point in time, and on the application of Marine Scientific Research Permit, the DFA did not receive an application relating to this alleged MSR activity. That is the status as of now.
Thank you very much.
It's not a question of asking permission. It's a way by which government can collectively and address a particular issue. If an issue is actually complex, it cannot just be one agency that actually makes a decision. So there are different clusters, there are different bodies, such as what I mentioned, which actually addresses it. And then because we are tackling or dealing with external relations, it is us then that actually acts based on recommendations from various sources.
Thank you very much again to the DFA Press Corps, and we look forward to future interactions with you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
I understand there's coffee and some snacks that you may partake of before you go.
Huh? Okay naman. It jitters for the first encounter, but other than that, it should be fine. Other than that, it should be fine.